The most haunting part of Jennifer Hartley's disappearance wasn't how fast it happened. Just 4 minutes between her front door and a mailbox 4 houses away. It wasn't even the forensic mystery of DNA that would remain silent for 18 years before telling its story. It was the unbearable closeness, the physical nearness that would break the Hartley family more deeply than the crime itself. For 6,574 straight days, the man who knew everything about what happened lived just 23 steps from their front door. Close enough to hear Diane Hartley crying through the walls at 3 a.m., close enough to see Thomas Hartley standing still in the driveway each morning, staring at the stretch of sidewalk where his daughter's trail ended. Close enough to show up at Jennifer's memorial, sign the guest book, and leave a message wishing the family peace. Mark Allen Stelling didn't leave Monroe, Michigan after August 16, 2003. He stayed. He watched. He moved through their grief like a researcher watching from behind glass. The closeness wasn't just physical. It felt planned. So when Detective Sarah Chun knocked on his door at 6 a.m. on June 27, 2021, holding a warrant, Diane Hartley collapsed just 23 steps away in her own driveway. Because the real distance wasn't between their homes. It was between the truth and her kitchen window. Time had finally run out for the man who made watching into a way of life, and their pain into a ritual. If you're drawn to cases where truth hides not in shadows but right in front of us in plain daylight, where the person you're looking for is sometimes standing beside you, then consider subscribing. These stories remind us that justice doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it takes years of digging, looking at what's always been there, waiting for the right technology and the right investigator to finally connect the pieces. They ask us to look at our own surroundings, at what we've overlooked, at pain we've accepted as normal, and at which friendly faces might be standing in place of the ones we miss most. August 16, 2003, 3:47 p.m. The temperature, 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity so thick it left a metallic taste in your mouth. That heavy, quiet air right before a summer storm. When everything feels like it's holding its breath. Jennifer Hartley pushes open the front door of 412 Birch Avenue with her right shoulder. The frame sticks every summer, swollen by heat, an everyday struggle you don't even think about until someone has to retrace your last moments and notices you pushed it open the same way you always did. Emotion etched into muscle memory, unknowingly writing the final sentence of a story that thought it had just begun. She's wearing denim shorts from American Eagle, a yellow tank top that her mother later describes to police as sunshine-colored, then corrects herself. More like marigold, because tiny details become crucial when they become part of a file. On her feet, navy Adidas sandals, leaving behind a clear tread pattern in the fine layer of pollen dust on the driveway. Forensic teams will later photograph the prints from 17 different angles, building a digital reconstruction of her last known path, analyzing those steps with the kind of care usually reserved fossils. Her iPod is in her right pocket. White earbuds dangle from under her shirt. The kind of wired tech that would be obsolete within 3 years. If you'd asked her, she would have said she was listening to Hey Ya by Outkast. That song was everywhere that summer. Detective Kyle Morrison still can't hear it without his hands shaking. Diane Hartley hears it in her sleep, her daughter dancing down the driveway, looping endlessly until the song cuts out, and then she's just gone. A missing frame. A scene that never finished. The mailbox is 4 houses north. A walk Jennifer had made thousands of times since the family moved to Birch Avenue in 1996, back when Monroe, Michigan felt like the kind of town where nothing truly awful happened. Maybe a few teenagers drank in the Stony Creek parking lot. Maybe someone stole a lawn gnome or two. But this wasn't supposed to happen here. At Jennifer's usual pace. That walk should take 4 minutes. Her mother could describe it exactly. The rhythm, the slight bounce, the way her ponytail swung behind her. Confident, calm, unhurried. At 3:48 p.m., Mark Stelling is outside washing his 2001 Ford Explorer in the driveway of 414 Birch Avenue. 3 neighbors will later testify to police that they saw him there. Water running from a green hose, spraying patterns across the concrete. His white shirt soaked in sweat and hose water. Watching Jennifer walk past. One witness, Barbara Henderson from 416 Birch, described it as normal neighbor awareness. Barbara will spend the rest of her life analyzing that phrase. What is normal, really? Was his glance 2 seconds? 5? Did she witness something darker and convince herself it was just a neighbor being polite, because that's what we're all taught to do? When you've lived 3 houses apart for 2 years, exchanged holiday cookies, shared complaints about missed trash pickups, your brain builds trust. It's wired to find comfort in routine, to see friendly patterns and familiar faces. That's exactly why Mark Stelling had spent 2 years crafting that. Familiarity with the patience of someone mastering a skill. At 9:43 p.m., Detective Kyle Morrison gets the call. Jennifer Hartley is missing. More than 6 hours have passed since her mother expected her home. That delay becomes one of many missteps that will leave a permanent mark on the case. Diane Hartley had first called the non-emergency line at 8:15 p.m. when worry began to outweigh reason. Jennifer was 19, legally an adult, so the dispatcher logged it as a possible runaway. Protocol said they had to wait, unless there was clear danger. By the time Morrison pulls up to 412 Birch Avenue at 10:17 p.m., the air has cooled to 61 degrees. And the storm that had hovered all day is now fully unleashed, one of those loud, flooding Michigan thunderstorms that erases everything in its path. Any footprints, fibers, or clues between the Hartley house and that mailbox are gone, washed into drains by wind and rain. The system hadn't understood how every minute mattered. That 6 hours could stretch into forever. That the chance to find her alive might have already passed. Morrison is 34. This is his first time leading a missing person case. He's working for the Monroe County Sheriff's Department, with tools that are 5 years outdated and training. Focused more on drugs than missing persons. Monroe is a town of about 22,000. Major crimes here usually mean rural meth labs or the occasional domestic dispute. The department has just 2 detectives, Morrison and his partner, James Reynolds. Reynolds is on vacation in Traverse City with his family, unreachable until Monday. So Morrison stands alone in the Hartley's living room, scribbling details in a notebook. Jennifer's height -5'6". Her weight, about 130, blonde, shoulder-length hair, usually in a ponytail. Last known outfit already described. No purse, no phone. She'd left her Nokia on the kitchen counter. It was just a walk to the mailbox. 4 minutes. No ID on her. Just a house key and an iPod. Thomas Hartley wants to start a search right away, but Morrison advises against it. Too dark, too dangerous. Better to wait until morning, when searchers can see. He tells them most missing adults return within 24 hours. That Jennifer likely took shelter from the storm and would come home soon, cold and a little embarrassed. It's the sort of reassurance officers often give, because the real truth, that those early hours are critical, that most chances disappear fast, and that Morrison doesn't have the experience or resources for what this case will require, is too heavy to say aloud. Morrison leaves the house at 11:33 p.m. He drives the KM route Jennifer would have taken 4 blocks. His spotlight sweeps across wet sidewalks and glowing house numbers. Nothing. Whatever happened occurred. 6 hours earlier. And the storm has wiped away the evidence like someone trying to clean a slate. What Morrison doesn't do, because he hasn't been trained to, and because protocol doesn't demand it, is check the nearby houses. He doesn't knock on the door of 414 Birch Avenue that night. He doesn't ask Mark Stelling if he saw or heard anything. He doesn't ask if any unfamiliar vehicles were nearby. That conversation won't happen until August 19th, 3 days later, as part of routine neighborhood interviews. By then, Stelling has had 72 hours to polish his version of events, to fine-tune his reactions, to rehearse the role of concerned neighbor. So well it will keep him out of focus. For the next 18 years, the official search begins at 6:47 a.m. on August 17th, 43. Volunteers from Monroe Community Church show up to help. It's the Hartley family's church. It's also Mark Stelling's. He's there. 2. Wearing hiking boots and a navy windbreaker, a thermos of coffee in his hand. At 8 a.m. he stands next to Thomas Hartley on the corner of Birch and Elm, going over the exact route Jennifer would have walked. He hands Thomas that coffee, quietly participating in the moment like someone who simply cares. In 2021, during the renewed investigation, officials collect over 24 photos taken by volunteers on that day. In the background of several of them, Mark Stelling appears, helping coordinate search grids, passing out maps, standing next to Diane Hartley as she tapes flyers to telephone poles. Her hands shake so badly she can barely work the stapler, and standing beside her is the man responsible, offering comfort with one hand, while hiding what he knew with the other. In one photograph taken by Jennifer's best friend, Ashley Morrison, no relation to the detective, Mark Stelling is visible through the Hartley's kitchen window. It's 2:15 p.m. He's inside their home, sipping from one of their mugs. He's part of the close circle of support that often forms in small towns during moments of tragedy, where neighbors blur into family and boundaries fade in the name of shared grief. In those early 72 hours, the investigation runs on assumptions that seem reasonable at the time, but will later prove to be deeply flawed. Jennifer is 19, legally an adult. The first working theory suggests a voluntary disappearance, maybe a conflict with a boyfriend, maybe a mental health episode that hadn't yet been recognized. Maybe just a moment of wanting to get away, to breathe, outside the pressures of nursing school and family expectations. This idea gains strength from the lack of physical evidence. There are no signs of struggle on the sidewalk. No one heard any yelling. No suspicious vehicles were reported. Jennifer simply walked out her front door and vanished somewhere, between one step and the next. As if reality split open and took her someplace unreachable, a place where families search for decades and answers feel permanently out of reach. Then, on August 19th, the first physical evidence appears. Marcus Webb, a local cyclist, spots something in a drainage culvert about 2.5 miles north of Birch Avenue, near Telegraph Road and Stony Creek. It's a navy blue JanSport backpack, partially submerged in rainwater. Inside, investigators find Jennifer's anatomy textbook, a pack of gum, a pen, and the same thermos her mother had filled with coffee that morning. But what's not inside is just as important. There's no iPod, no house key, no ID. The Michigan State Police Crime Lab gets the backpack, and using the best tools available in 2003, visual inspection, fingerprint dusting, DNA swabs, they begin the process. Jennifer's DNA is recovered from the straps and the handle, expected, but not helpful. But there's something else, a partial DNA profile on one of the shoulder straps. It doesn't match Jennifer, and it doesn't match anyone in her family. This unknown DNA is entered into Michigan State database, and then into CODIS, the National DNA Index, which had launched in 1998 and was still expanding in 2003. No match. The sample is logged as item 17B. It's sealed, labeled, and placed in storage at the Monroe County Sheriff's Department in a temperature-controlled room designed to preserve biological evidence for the future. At the time, this is the height of forensic science. The ability to extract DNA, even if it doesn't yet point to anyone, holds the promise that someday it might. But in 2003, the technology has limits. It can't identify someone with no criminal history, no prior arrests, no reason to be in the system. To the database, that DNA is invisible. It's a clue without a name. A question waiting for the world to catch up. Between August and December 2003, Detective Morrison builds a file that grows to 412 pages. It includes 87 interviews, timelines from cell tower data, security camera stills, forensics reports. On paper, it's a portrait of a careful and committed investigation done within a system stretched too thin. That year, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department operates on a $3 million annual budget. It sounds like a lot until you account for staff, gear, vehicles, and training. Overtime for detectives isn't approved unless it's considered. Life or death. Morrison keeps working Jennifer's case, but alongside 3 other active files. By October, reality sets in, resources are limited. Jennifer's name becomes one among many in a stack of open investigations, still active, still reviewed, but no longer dominating Morrison's every hour. The community's response follows a familiar pattern. There's a strong outpouring of support in the first month: search teams, prayer circles, benefit dinners. Her photo stays on the local news for weeks, but by November, the searches have ended. There's nowhere left to search. People return to their routines. The cameras leave, and the Hartley family is left in a terrible in-between, the kind of not knowing that psychologists describe as more painful than confirmed loss, because without answers, the mind never finds rest. It stays alert, waiting, searching for signs that never come. On December 14, 2003, the community gathers at Monroe Community Church for what's technically called a celebration of life. There's no body, no legal declaration of death, but everyone understands what the ceremony means. It's the quiet shift from hoping she'll come back to mourning the likelihood that she won't. Even still, Diane Hartley will continue setting Jennifer's place at the dinner table for 3 more years. The church's fellowship hall seats 340 people. Every seat is filled. Mark Stelling sits in the 7th row, wearing a dark suit. When the service ends, guests line up to sign the book and speak to the family. Stelling waits patiently. When it's his turn, he hugs both Diane and Thomas Hartley, tells them he's praying for peace. They thank him, and not a single person in the room, not Morrison, standing quietly in the back, not the family, not the guests, has any reason to suspect that the man offering sympathy already knows the truth. Knows where Jennifer is, knows what she felt, knows exactly what sound she made in her final moments. Clue that would eventually solve Jennifer Hartley's case had been sitting quietly in that navy backpack found on August 19, 2003, but the science needed to unlock its meaning wouldn't exist for another third team. Years. The DNA sample taken from the shoulder strap held just 0.8 nanograms of material. In 2003, that was enough to generate a partial profile through a method known as short tandem repeat or STR analysis. It was the most advanced tool at the time, focusing on specific repeating sections of DNA. The profile pulled 13 markers, enough to rule out innocent people. but not strong enough to positively identify someone with the level of certainty required in court. And more importantly, it meant nothing without a database match. In 2003, the National CODIS system held about 1.3 million offender profiles, which sounds like a lot, until you remember the U.S. population was nearly 290 million at the time, and most citizens had never been arrested for an offense that required DNA submission. So the DNA sat in storage, preserved, cataloged, but silent, like a book written in a language no one could yet read. 2004 turned into 2005. Then 2006. The Hartley family began developing small rituals, the kind of quiet routines families create to survive what cannot be fixed. Diane made Jennifer's bed every morning. Tightly tucked hospital corners, fluffed pillows, just in case her daughter came home that day and needed a clean place to rest. Thomas took care of Jennifer's 1997 Honda Civic, which sat untouched in the garage with expired tags. He started it once a week, just to keep the battery alive and the engine from locking up. They celebrated Jennifer's birthday every March 3rd with cake and gifts, which went unwrapped and gathered dust in her bedroom. On August 16th, the anniversary of her disappearance, they held candlelight vigils in the front yard. Neighbors came, including Mark Stelling. He brought flowers. He stood in the circle. He held a candle. His expression was just right, respectful, sympathetic. He blended in completely, because in Monroe, that's what neighbors do. They show up. They comfort. No one suspects. Detective Kyle Morrison retired in 2009. At just 40 years old, over his career, he solved 73 cases. But it's the one he didn't solve, Jennifer's, that stayed with him. At dinner parties, if the conversation turned personal, he might mention it after a drink or two. How he can't listen to Hey Ya by Outkast without his hands trembling. How that backpack, soaked, abandoned, still shows up in his dreams. How he sometimes drives past 412 Birch Avenue when visiting family in Monroe. He always slows down, always glances at the sidewalk. But all he sees is the normal, empty quiet of a neighborhood where something unthinkable happened. The case passed from Morrison to Detective James Reynolds. When Reynolds retired in 2014, it went to Detective Patricia Chun, and in 2019, the case was transferred again to Detective Sarah Chun, no relation. That same year, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department created its first dedicated cold case unit, funded by federal grants and donations from local residents. Sarah Chun was 36. She had a master's in forensic science from Michigan State and specialized training in a field that hadn't even existed in 2003, forensic genetic genealogy. This field, which combines DNA data with traditional detective work, had already changed the future of cold case investigations. Chun studied Jennifer's case with steady, focused attention, believing that evidence doesn't fade. It waits. That time doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it prepares. In March 2020, the DNA from Jennifer's backpack is re-examined. The difference in technology is staggering. Modern STR kits can extract full DNA profiles from fragments that once would have been discarded. They can amplify even trace amounts left behind by touch. This time, the results show a complete DNA profile with 20 STR markers instead of 13. That increase in specificity brings the statistical certainty to 1 in 7.9 trillion. A match that, by scientific standards, is as close to absolute truth as evidence allows. But even this improved profile doesn't appear in CODIS. It's a perfect, clean fingerprint and still useless without context. In the past, that would have ended the search, but Chun had followed the rise of forensic genealogy since 2018. When it helped unmask the Golden State Killer after 40 years, the method is still debated. It works in legal gray zones that make some prosecutors uneasy, but by 2020, it had helped solve over 200 cold cases across the Pichode sus. Country. The process involves uploading forensic DNA into consumer genetic databases, the kind people use to learn about family trees and ancestry. These databases don't identify suspects directly. They reveal relatives, distant or close, who share genetic markers. Then, genealogists begin constructing family trees. From there, they narrow down suspects based on age, location, and access. In April 2020, Chun submits a formal request to the department asking for $15,000 to hire Parabon Nanolabs, a private lab that specializes in this exact type of work. The request is denied due to budget cuts related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Chun tries again in August. Denied again in November. Then, Diane Hartley reads a news story about a cold case in Oakland County solved through forensic genealogy. She contacts Detective Chen directly, and without hesitation, she offers to pay for the analysis herself. She withdraws $15,000 from the retirement account she and Thomas had planned to use for their dream trip to Ireland. They'll never take the trip to Ireland. Thomas's health is fading, and the money no longer holds value, not compared to answers, not compared to peace, not compared to ending the waiting that's defined their lives for 17 years. The forensic genealogy process begins in January 2021. Parabon Nanolabs is contracted for the analysis. The work is led by Melissa Torres, a forensic genealogist working from her home office in Sacramento, California, surrounded by screens displaying crisscrossed family trees that sprawl like neural networks. Torres uploads the unknown male DNA profile into GetMatch, one of the few consumer DNA databases that allows law enforcement access. It returns 2,847 genetic matches ranging from close relatives to distant cousins several generations removed. It sounds chaotic, but Torres isn't searching for one person in a crowd. She's narrowing the crowd, methodically eliminating everyone who doesn't belong. Over 4 months, she works 16-hour days, cross-referencing family tree data with public records, census entries, obituaries, birth and marriage certificates, military files, immigration documents, and social media. She reconstructs family lines going back 5 generations, then tracks them forward to the present. Eventually, she identifies 3 distinct lines with male relatives of the right age who lived near Monroe, Michigan in 2003. The first line is ruled out. Quickly, all the men either passed away before 2003 or had verified alibis. The second takes 3 weeks to eliminate, ending when Torres finds one man was in prison in Indiana during the week Jennifer disappeared. The record confirming that fact isn't digital. It's buried in paper archives that Torres had to request directly from the State Corrections Department. Then comes the third line, and a last name that makes her pause, Stelung. German in origin. Uncommon in the U.S. genealogical records show the Stelling family first arrived in Michigan in 1912. Initially settling in Detroit before spreading out across the state. Torres builds the tree with meticulous care. Wilhelm and Greta Stelling arrived at Ellis Island on March 15, 1912 with 3 children in tow. They settled in Detroit, where Wilhelm worked for Ford. Their son Heinrich married in 1928, had 4 children, including Robert Stelling, born 1935. Robert married Patricia Mueller in 1951. They had 2 sons, Mark Allen Stelling, Born March 15, 1952, and Daniel Robert Stelling. Born 1954. Torres searches property records for Mark Allen Stelling. She finds he owns a house at 414 Birch Avenue in Monroe. Purchased in 2001, still listed as his residence in 2020 tax records. She opens Google Maps. Measures the space between 414 and 412 Birch Avenue. 23 steps. On May 14, 2021. Detective Sarah Chun receives Torres's preliminary report via encrypted email. She reads it 3 times, each pass bringing the full weight of the findings into focus. The genetic genealogy places Mark Stelling as a high probability match. But it's not enough for an arrest. Not yet. This tool narrows suspects. But it doesn't prove guilt. Chun needs a direct DNA comparison from Stelling himself to match against the DNA from Jennifer's backpack, and that DNA must be collected in a way that holds up in court, Michigan. Law allows law enforcement to use abandoned DNA, genetic material someone discards in public, with no expectation of privacy. Coffee cups, cigarette butts, napkins, straws. Anything touched and tossed can become evidence. Chun begins planning a quiet surveillance operation, one that has to be discreet, carefully executed, and legally sound. For 3 weeks in May and June 2021, she and her partner, Detective Marcus Thompson, watch 414 Birch Avenue. They study Mark Stelling's routine. Tuesday mornings, 9:15 a.m., groceries at Kroger on Monroe Street. Thursdays at 10:20 a.m., coffee at Lakeside Diner with 3 retired friends. Saturday mornings, yard work. Sundays at 10 a.m., church services at Monroe Community Church. Stelling is 69 years old. Retired since 2016 from his job as a facilities manager at Monroe High School. He's lived alone since 2018, after his wife Patricia passed away from ovarian cancer. From the outside, he looks like any other quiet, older man in a small Michigan town. Predictable, private, unremarkable. Then comes the opportunity. Thursday, June 10, 2021. Chun and Thompson follow Stelling to the Lakeside Diner. They take a seat at a corner booth, with a clear view of the table where he meets his usual group: Donald Kramer, James Mitchell, Robert Santos, all longtime residents, all retired. They talk baseball, the Detroit Tigers, and whether the city should approve a new development project on Telegraph Road. It's casual, relaxed conversation. Stelling drinks 2 cups of black coffee, orders a slice of apple pie. His voice carries across the room with calm confidence. No hesitation. No signs of concern. Just another Thursday for a man who doesn't know 2 detectives are watching his every move, waiting for him to leave something behind. At 11 a.m., Mark Stelling stands, thanks his friends, leaves some cash on the table for his part of the bill, and walks out of the diner. Outside, he tosses his used napkin and the wooden coffee stirrer into the trash bin by the entrance. A simple motion. Automatic. The kind of thing we all do without a second thought, not realizing the items we discard can hold our genetic fingerprints for hours or even days. Evidence. Waiting quietly, Detective Sarah Chun waits 4 full minutes after Stelling drives away in his 2015 Chevrolet Silverado. Then she steps forward. Wearing nitrile gloves, she opens the trash bin, uses sterile forceps to retrieve the napkin and stirrer, seals them separately in evidence bags, labels everything according to protocol, and transports them directly to the Michigan State Police Forensic Lab in Lansing. They're logged into evidence with a paper trail so precise no defense lawyer could argue contamination or mishandling. 12 days later, On the morning of June 22, 2021, Chun receives an email. The DNA recovered from those discarded items matches the unknown male profile found on Jennifer Hartley's backpack. The match probability exceeds 99.97%. The odds of a random match are about 1 in 340 billion, so unlikely it's nearly impossible. An answer as close to certainty as science can offer. Chun sits at her desk, reading the report, and feels the sensation cold case detectives often describe, not triumph. Not relief, but a hollow, heavy quiet. The truth had been there all along. Waiting for technology to catch up. Waiting for someone to stay with the case long enough to uncover it. She thinks about Stellung at Jennifer's memorial service. About how he stood just 23 steps away from her family for 18 years. She thinks about the smiles, the condolences, the shared moments, and realizes it was never coincidence. It was strategy, a need not just to commit the act, but to witness the grief, like those who return to the scene or insert themselves into investigations. Stellung had positioned himself to quietly watch the pain he caused. Chun spends 5 days coordinating with the PTR, Monroe County Prosecutor's Office, and the Michigan State Police. They need search warrants for Stellung's home at 414 Birch Avenue, his vehicles, any storage units or secondary properties he owns. They bring in a SWAT team in case he's armed or uncooperative, and they prepare a media strategy because this story will travel fast. The friendly neighbor. The long unsolved case. The quiet man next door who had fooled everyone. June 27, 2021, 6:13 m. Temperature 56 degrees Fahrenheit. The sky just beginning to lighten. Birdsong faint but rising. Everything about the moment feels peaceful until it isn't. Detective Chun stands on the porch of 414 Birch Avenue. Surrounded by 6 officers. She wears a bulletproof vest with police marked across the chest. Her right hand rests on her holstered Glock. Her left lifts to knock on the door behind which 18 years of lies have been protected. Mark Stellung opens it. He's wearing a blue terrycloth robe, a white t-shirt, gray sweatpants. Barefoot. His hair is thinner now, his face worn with age. There's confusion at first, the kind that comes from being woken earlier than usual, but then something else moves across his face. Not fear, not panic. Calculation. Recognition. The quiet realization of someone who always knew this day might come, someone who had counted on staying one step ahead of science, but knew deep down that it was never guaranteed. Chun keeps her voice even. Professional, controlled. I'm Detective Sarah Chun, Monroe County Sheriff's Department. I have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the disappearance and murder of Jennifer Hartley. He doesn't argue. You have the right to remain silent. 23 steps away, Diane Hartley is standing in her kitchen, making coffee. She hears something, muffled voices, car doors, the static crackle of police radios. She walks to the window, sees police vehicles, sees officers in tactical gear, sees Mark Stellung in handcuffs being walked to a patrol car. At first, it doesn't register. It's not until Detective Chun knocks at her door 20 minutes later, her face carrying the look Diane has learned to recognize, the one that always comes before difficult truths, that it finally lands. The waiting is over. Jennifer is not coming home. Diane collapses in the driveway. Paramedics arrive quickly. Her vitals are stable, but emotionally she's shattered. She's taken to Monroe Mercy Hospital, treated for acute stress. Thomas meets her there. They sit quietly together in a hospital room as Detective Chen gently explains that the man who brought them casseroles, who helped organize search parties, who stood beside them in grief, had been the reason for it all along. He had played the role of The helpful neighbor so convincingly that no one ever imagined he was the one who took Jennifer's life, but now his DNA confirms it. There will be a trial. There will be justice. Diane hears those words, but they don't feel real. The truth is too heavy, too vast to fully absorb. All she can think about is how many mornings she stood in her kitchen making coffee, while Mark Stelling stood in his just 23 steps away, both of them staring out their windows at the same quiet street. One searching, the other pretending. Truth and lies, side by side, divided not by space, but by knowing. Mark Stelling's interrogation lasts 11 hours and 17 minutes over 2 days. Inside interview room C at the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. 4 cameras record every moment. A court reporter types every word, fingers cramping as the confession trickles out. Slow as water through stone. Each detail arrives with hesitation, filtering through layers of defense until finally, Stelling admits what science already proved. His attorney, Patricia Gallagher, advises him to stay silent. He ignores her. The confession begins with excuses. He says he saw Jennifer walking alone that day, saw the storm clouds coming, offered her a ride to keep her safe. It was concern. He claims not something sinister, but Detective Sarah Chun knows how confessions work. They're not moments of clarity. They're negotiations, a way to admit just enough to fit the evidence, without fully owning the harm. So she presses. What time exactly did he see her? What car was he driving? Where did it happen? Under pressure, the story shifts. Stellung admits Jennifer said no. He followed her anyway. When she threatened to scream, he panicked. He grabbed her. She struggled. He says he never meant for it to go so far. That's the language people use to dodge responsibility, as if events unfolded without them, as if they were swept up in something rather than creating it. Chun asks about the backpack. Stelling says he dropped it in the culvert hoping it would be found, hoping to make police think she had gone farther from home so they wouldn't focus on Birch Avenue. And for 18 years, that strategy worked. Then she asks the question Diane and Thomas Hartley most need answered. Where is Jennifer? Stelling says he doesn't know anymore. He claims the landscape has changed. That development in Monroe County erased the landmarks he once used. He says he can't remember the exact location. A tactical answer, enough to suggest cooperation, but just vague enough to make sure her body is never found. A final act of control. A final way to keep the family in pain. Even in confession, Stelling chooses cruelty. Chun asks about the memorial service. Why attend? Why sign the guest book? Why hug Jennifer's parents and say he was praying for peace? The video shows his response at exactly 14 hours 47 minutes and 33 seconds on June 28, 2021. I wanted to see if they suspected anything, he says. I wanted to know if they knew. Chun asks, did you enjoy it? There's a long pause. 47 seconds of silence. I didn't think about it like that, he finally says, but the evidence tells a different story. What follows is a deeper investigation into Stelling's behavior, and what emerges reveals that this wasn't just strategy. It was a need. Search warrants executed at 414 Birch Avenue uncover a computer containing files dating back to 2003, folders organized by year. Inside, investigators find hundreds of photos taken from Stelling's windows, capturing the Hartleys across 2 decades. Diane making coffee, Thomas standing alone in the driveway, neighbors holding candles during vigils, holiday decorations that slowly fade year after year, grief documented. One photo stands out, dated August 16, 2018, 15 years to the day after Jennifer vanished, taken from Stelling's upstairs window around 8 p.m., the image shows the Hartleys in their front yard, surrounded by neighbors holding candles. In the corner of the photo, Stelling's reflection is caught in the glass. He's holding the camera. His face is clearly visible, and his expression what investigators describe in official reports as satisfaction. The look of someone revisiting the suffering he caused. Detective Chun sends the images to forensic psychologist Dr. Ramon Martinez. His analysis, filed as supplementary evidence on July 15, 2021, describes Stelling's actions as consistent with sadistic personality traits and a need for control, a form of narcissistic surveillance where harm isn't just inflicted but preserved, observed, and relived. Attending the memorial, offering condolences, keeping himself close to the family, Martinez calls it extreme risk-taking behavior that most offenders would never attempt. But for Stelling, the psychological reward of witnessing pain seems to have outweighed any fear of being caught. The investigation doesn't stop there. Chun coordinates with law enforcement in Ohio, Indiana, and other parts of Michigan. They begin examining Stelling's residential history, looking for unsolved disappearances of young women that might connect to the years he spent living elsewhere. The investigation uncovers 4 cases that deserve a second look. Rachel Kowalski, age 22, disappeared in Toledo, Ohio, on September 14, 1997, while walking to her car after an evening shift at a Marathon gas station. At the time, Mark Stelling was living in Toledo from 1995 to 2000, working as a maintenance supervisor at the same community college Rachel attended. Amy Thornton, age 19, went missing in Gary, Indiana, on July 3, 2000. After finishing her waitressing shift at a neighborhood diner, Stelling had moved to Gary just 1 month earlier. He lived 0.4 miles from that diner. Melissa Chang, age 21, vanished from Dearborn, Michigan, on April 18, 2005, while jogging in a community park. By then, Stelling had relocated to Monroe, but his brother Daniel still lived in Dearborn. Phone records show Mark visited him from April 16 to April 19 that year. The 4th case is especially chilling. Sarah Ann Brennan, age 20, disappeared in Monroe on October 12, 2007. Walking home from an evening class at Monroe Community College, her case echoed Jennifer's in every detail. A short walk, no witnesses, no trace. Her file sat just 5 blocks away from Jennifer's in the same property room. 4 years apart, 3 miles apart. No one ever connected them. Until now, reanalyzing evidence across 3 states takes months of cooperation with multiple departments and forensic labs. By September 2021, results begin arriving. Rachel Kowalski's jacket, preserved in evidence storage for over 2 decades, yields a DNA profile matching Mark Stelling with 99.94% certainty. Amy Thornton's case has no viable biological evidence left, but records show that Stelling had been interviewed in 2000 because he lived in Amy's apartment complex. He told police he'd been home all night, saw nothing, said all the right things. Another role played. Another report filed and forgotten. Melissa Chang's case brings the most haunting discovery. Her abandoned car was found at a state park 20 miles from Dearborn. Police had processed it in 2005 with the tools they had. In 2021, Chun requests a reprocessing using modern technology. Analysis of the steering wheel yields a partial DNA profile. It matches Stelling, enough to support formal charges. Sarah Brennan's evidence, re-examined, gives nothing usable. Maybe Stelling learned from Jennifer's case. Maybe someone else was responsible. Or maybe time simply erased what could have been found. On November 8, 2021, Monroe County Prosecutor James Harrison holds a press conference. He announces expanded charges against Mark Stelling, 3 counts of first-degree murder, Jennifer Hartley, Rachel Kowalski, Melissa Chang. Plus additional charges: kidnapping, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice. The announcement airs live on local and national news. Diane and Thomas Hartley sit in the front row. Their faces show no victory, just the weariness of people who have carried too much pain for too long. The trial begins March 14, 2022. In Monroe County Circuit Court, Judge Elizabeth Morrison, presiding. Stelung pleads not guilty, forcing the prosecution to lay out every detail, requiring the Hartleys to hear the full reconstruction of what happened to their daughter. The trial lasts 6 weeks. The jury deliberates for 9 hours. The verdict: guilty on all counts. On May 3, 2022, Judge Morrison delivers the sentence: 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Stelung, now 70, will never leave prison. Before the sentence is imposed, the judge invites victim impact statements. Diane Hartley speaks for 17 minutes. She describes what it feels like to discover that your daughter's killer lived 23 steps away, that he hugged you at her memorial, told you he was praying for peace, that every moment of kindness was part of an act, that your grief had been observed, documented, and used as a way to feel powerful. Thomas Hartley's words are shorter, just 3 minutes. He speaks of his declining health, of the years lost in limbo, of the way time stopped when Jennifer disappeared. He wishes Stelling had been caught immediately so they could have mourned properly. Instead of being frozen in uncertainty for 18 years, his voice breaks multiple times. He never once looks in Stelling's direction. Rachel Kowalski's mother speaks. Melissa Chang's father speaks. And Sarah Brennan's sister asks to speak too, even though Stelling hasn't been charged in Sarah's case. Even though the evidence didn't hold out, she believes he's responsible. And this may be her only chance to say it out loud. When given a chance to speak, Stelling's attorney advises against it. He speaks anyway. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused. I made terrible mistakes. I'll have to live with what I've done. The words feel distant, detached, minimized, passive. Even now he avoids calling his choices what they were. Not mistakes, but actions. Not accidents, but decisions. After sentencing, Mark Stelling is transferred to Oaks Correctional Facility in Manistee, Michigan. He'll serve his sentence in the general prison population. His health is in decline. He's unlikely to live more than a decade. The families had quietly hoped for the death penalty, but Michigan abolished capital punishment in 1846. So life without parole is the harshest sentence allowed. It guarantees Stelling will die behind bars, but it also guarantees him shelter, medical care, 3 meals a day, things Jennifer Hartley never had again, things Rachel Kowalski and Melissa Chang were also denied. The aftermath will stretch across 2022 and into 2023. But for the families, the sense of time has already been broken for years. As the long process of litigation and institutional change unfolds, the Hartley family files a wrongful death lawsuit against the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. They allege negligence in the original 2003 investigation, citing delays in DNA processing, a lack of thorough neighborhood canvassing during the first 72 hours, and mishandling of key evidence through poor chain of custody procedures. The suit seeks $15 million in damages. Monroe County settles for $2.3 million in March 2023. Without admitting fault. To Diane and Thomas, the money means little except as proof that their daughter was failed, Other families soon file lawsuits too, setting off a chain of legal action that forces the county to audit all cold case evidence storage. New protocols are introduced, stricter preservation methods, regular reviews using updated technology. Sheriff Robert Patterson, who was elected in 2020 and not involved in the original case, announces the formation of a cold case unit, 3 full-time detectives, an annual budget of $750,000 funded by county resources and federal grants. In April 2023, the Michigan State Legislature introduces Jennifer's Law, requiring all law enforcement agencies in the state to upload forensic DNA from unsolved violent crimes to national databases within 90 days of collection. The law also mandates a 5-year review cycle for all cold cases using current forensic tools. It passes with overwhelming bipartisan support and is signed into law by Governor Gretchen Whitmer on June 15, 2023. Ohio and Indiana follow with similar bills, creating a network of cooperation that didn't exist when Jennifer Hartley vanished, but legislation and settlements don't resolve the most painful question of all. Where is Jennifer's body? And where are Rachel's and Melissa's remains? Stelling says he doesn't remember. He says too much time has passed, that the places have changed, the landmarks are gone. That fear clouded his memory. Prosecutors think he's lying. They believe he remembers everything and is still withholding details as one final act of control, but they can't prove it, can't force him to talk, can only hope that guilt or reflection will one day lead to the truth. As of November 2024, Jennifer Hartley's remains have not been found. Rachel Kowalski's family holds a memorial without her body. Melissa Chang's parents have stopped hoping for a burial. All 3 families are left in a space that has no closure. They know what happened. They know who was responsible. And justice was served, at least on paper, but there are no goodbyes. No graves to visit. No way to complete the human act of laying someone to rest. In Monroe, the community begins to reckon with what it means that Stelling lived among them, that someone capable of so much harm could exist unnoticed for so long. Monroe Community Church, where he attended services for 18 years, hosts open discussions about how trust can be misused and how to remain welcoming while still being watchful. Attendance drops by 40% as congregants struggle with their own questions about faith, about judgment, and about how they missed what was happening just a few pews away. The annual Birch Avenue Block Party, organized by Stelling from 2006 to 2019, is discontinued for good. Its absence becomes a quiet symbol of how betrayal can hollow out even the most ordinary traditions. Real estate values on Birch Avenue fall through 2022 as potential buyers learn the story and decide they'd rather not live near its shadows. Diane and Thomas Hartley receive offers to buy their home, 412 Birch Avenue, from crime tourism companies and others who see business in grief. They refuse every one. They won't sell because Jennifer might still come home, even though everyone knows the truth, even though Stelling confessed, even though science confirmed it. Diane cannot let go of the place where her daughter was last seen. She cannot break that link. She cannot allow the door to fully close. On September 22, 2023, Thomas Hartley dies at age 79 from complications related to congestive heart failure. His doctor attributes the decline to stress, accumulated through decades of sorrow, but his family knows. Thomas died from what they call proximity trauma, from discovering that Jennifer's killer had been just 23 steps away for 18 years. From knowing he stood in his driveway thousands of mornings while that man watched from across the street. The man watched from across the street. realizing that the comfort they received was laced with surveillance. His obituary lists Jennifer as predeceased. Her body remains missing, and that wording, "remains missing," captures what the family feels every day. Jennifer exists in a kind of suspended time, not alive, but not fully gone. Diane Hartley takes what strength she has left and channels it into advocacy. She works with Michigan's Missing Persons Clearinghouse and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, pushing for better data sharing and stronger investigation practices. She testifies before state lawmakers about what she lived through and why the system must do better. In March 2024, she appears in a documentary on forensic genetic genealogy. The interview is filmed in the living room of 412 Birch Avenue. Jennifer's high school graduation photo sits on the mantel behind her. Diane speaks with a quiet strength, explaining what it's like to wait 2 decades for answers, only to receive them in the hardest way possible. Detective Sarah Chun is promoted to sergeant in July 2023 and continues to lead Monroe County's cold case unit. She applies what she's learned from Jennifer's case to 17 other unsolved files. She creates a new protocol for forensic genetic genealogy, which becomes a model across Michigan. Other departments begin consulting her on how to store evidence properly, how to review forgotten cases, and how to build systems that don't leave victims behind. On her desk, she keeps a photo of Jennifer Hartley, smiling at her nursing school orientation in 2002. When visitors ask who the young woman is, Chun tells them, solving a case doesn't bring peace. It brings responsibility. To keep going, to find the next truth, to believe no question is beyond answering. Mark Stelling now lives inside a 6-by-9-foot cell at Oaks Correctional Facility. He spends 23 hours a day in that space, a place that, for his victims' families, represents both justice served and a kind of mercy he never gave to those he harmed. His brother, Daniel, still visits. Daniel insists Mark was a good man who made terrible choices, someone who deserves forgiveness, someone who shouldn't be remembered only for the worst thing he's ever done. It's the kind of language that often comes from family, the hope that love means redemption, the need to believe you truly knew the person you grew up with. But kindness in one part of life doesn't erase cruelty in another. You can share decades with someone and still not know who they truly are. In August 2024, Stelling gives a phone interview to Amanda Richardson, a journalist with the Detroit Free Press. He talks about the crimes in a voice Richardson describes as detached, almost clinical, as if recounting something he watched, not something he did. He claims he thinks of his victims every day, that he prays for their families, that he wishes he could undo the past. But when Richardson presses him on whether he'll reveal the burial sites, Stelling insists he can't remember. He says the trauma of those nights created memory gaps, that he's cooperated as much as possible, but simply doesn't have the answers. Richardson writes that he maintained eye contact through the glass partition as he spoke, showing none of the typical signs of deception. She notes this could mean either he's telling the truth, or he's mastered the kind of lying that doesn't raise red flags. The interview draws immediate backlash. Families of the victims are outraged that Stelling was given a platform, one that allowed him to appear thoughtful, even remorseful, instead of manipulative. Diane Hartley writes a public response, published in the same newspaper. She argues that Stelling's refusal to share burial sites isn't forgetfulness, it's one last act of control. She says the media shouldn't reward his silence with attention that causes more pain for the people he's already hurt. Free Press editorial board later issues a formal apology, acknowledging that their interest in understanding a killer should not have come at the cost of re-traumatizing victims' families. Meanwhile, the investigation into Rachel Kowalski's case sparks a broader review in Ohio. The Lucas County Sheriff's Department looks again at unsolved disappearances from 1995 to 2000. When Stelling was living in Toledo, they find 3 more cases with unsettling similarities. Young women, last seen close to home, vanished without a trace. In 2 of those cases, DNA was preserved, but modern analysis finds no match to Stelling. That leaves open 2 possibilities. Either someone else was responsible, or Stelling was more careful about leaving evidence. The 3rd case has no biological evidence at all, just old witness accounts and a missing person. Gone now for 27 years. In Indiana, Amy Thornton's family pushes for charges, though the DNA is insufficient. They believe the circumstantial case is strong. Stelling lived in Amy's apartment complex. He had no confirmed alibi, and witness descriptions placed a man matching his profile near the scene. Still, the Lake County prosecutor decides the evidence doesn't meet the standard of reasonable doubt, especially given that Stelling is already serving multiple life sentences. That decision devastates Amy's mother, Patricia. She tells reporters that Amy deserves justice too, that all victims should be treated equally, and that Amy's case was treated as less urgent because her suspected killer is already behind bars. The academic world begins to take notice. Studies emerge examining how some perpetrators use proximity as part of their control. Dr. Martinez publishes an article titled "Surveillance as Sadism" in the Journal of Forensic Psychology. Uses Stelling as a key example, arguing that for some killers, the crime isn't just about the act itself, but the aftermath, watching families grieve, knowing they're the reason why. The paper calls for law enforcement to expand their view of suspects to include those who seem overly helpful, who insert themselves into searches, who keep close to the investigation. These patterns, while easy to overlook, can be signs of a more complex pathology, one where the real crime continues long after the disappearance. At Monroe Community Church, where Stelling once worshipped, a reckoning begins. Pastor Rebecca Williams delivers a sermon in October 2024 titled, "Evil Among Us." She speaks openly about what it means that Stelling was part of their community for 18 years, that he prayed with them, volunteered beside them, and was trusted by them. She acknowledges that religious communities are especially vulnerable to this kind of betrayal because they're built on trust, forgiveness, and grace. The sermon is later published in Christian Century, and it sparks wider discussions on how faith groups can remain open while still protecting themselves. Each year on August 16th, the Hartleys hold a vigil for Jennifer. Since Stelling's arrest, the tone has changed. What was once a hopeful gathering is now a quiet memorial, a way to acknowledge a life without a body, a death without closure. Fewer neighbors attend. Some have moved away. Others stay home because seeing Diane's ongoing grief feels too heavy. In August 2024, exactly 21 years after Jennifer vanished, 43 people attend the vigil, the same number who joined the very first search in 2003. Diane speaks briefly. Jennifer deserved better than what happened to her, she says. She deserved better than an investigation that didn't prioritize her. Better than a system that let her killer live 23 steps away from us for 18 years. We can't change what happened to Jennifer, but we can change the system that failed her. That's what I'll spend the rest of my life doing. Thank you for remembering her. As the candles flicker in the warm August darkness, photos of Jennifer as a child in high school, at nursing school orientation, sit quietly near the front, a reminder of all she was, and all she was meant to be. Around the small memorial, Someone has left a bouquet of bright yellow marigolds, the same color as the tank top Jennifer wore on her final walk. People begin to drift away slowly, reluctant to return to their lives, reluctant to accept that this quiet ritual is all that's left. This is how Jennifer exists now, in memory. In candlelight, in an absence that never quite fades, just down the street. The house at 414 Birch Avenue stands empty after Mark Stelling's arrest. The property passed to his brother Daniel. But Daniel never set foot inside. He couldn't face the building where Mark lived a double life, photographing grieving families from the same windows. He opened to wave hello. The house entered foreclosure in June 2023. The bank tried to sell it, even listed it at 40% below market value. But no one made an offer. No one wanted to live where such things had happened, where a predator hid behind kindness. And horror lived beside normalcy. The house began to fall apart. Windows cracked. The lawn grew wild. Paint peeled from the siding. It became a visual symbol of what had always been true decay disguised as stability. Just like Stelling himself, whose pathology was present all along. Waiting for science to find the words and the proof. In November 2024, Diane Hartley announced she was selling 412 Birch Avenue. She was 79 now. Her health was failing, and after everything, she could no longer live just 23 steps away from the place where her daughter's killer once watched them grieve. She was moving to Ann Arbor, closer to her son David, closer to two grandchildren Jennifer never got to meet, children Diane barely knew because grief had stolen the years she might have spent as a grandmother baking cookies, attending school plays, living a life untouched by sorrow. The sale felt like letting go of the place where Jennifer was last seen, of the porch where she had waved goodbye. Diane told herself what she needed to believe, that Jennifer wasn't in that house anymore, wasn't on Birch Avenue, wasn't anywhere she could visit. Jennifer now lived in case files, in DNA databases, in court transcripts and legislative reforms. She was in Jennifer's law, in protocols developed from her tragedy. In a city that would always remember what they missed, that evil lived among them, and they didn't see it. They welcomed it to churches and block parties. They trusted it because it smiled like them, talked like them, and played the part so well. In her final months on Birch Avenue, Diane wrestled with one question. Was there something she missed? Were there signs? Moments when Mark's mask slipped and she didn't recognize it? Times Jennifer tried to say something that Diane dismissed as typical teenage discomfort. It's a question every parent dreads, not just for what it asks, but for what it might mean. If evil can mimic kindness for decades, if danger can look so familiar, how do we know who's safe? How do we protect the people we love when deception can live right next door? On December 15th, 2024, Diane attended what would be her last court hearing. Stelling had filed a motion requesting permission to donate his organs after death. He claimed it was a way to express remorse, to give something back after taking so much. Prosecutors and victims' families opposed the motion. They argued it wasn't about redemption, that Stelling was trying to rewrite his legacy through a symbolic gesture while still refusing to tell them where their daughters were buried. Judge Morrison denied the motion. He ruled that Stelling could register as an organ donor like any prisoner. But the court would not help shape a narrative of redemption without full cooperation. Sitting in the courtroom, Diane watched Stelling, now 72 years old. He looked frail, his face gaunt, his hands unsteady. The orange jumpsuit made him seem more worn down than threatening. Still, Diane tried to connect the dots. The man who once brought them coffee and the man who stole their daughter, they didn't feel like the same person. But she knew they were. The kindness and the violence were never separate things. They were both part of the same plan. Proximity wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. His 18 years of helpfulness had been part of the crime. Outside the courthouse, Diane spoke briefly to reporters. Mark Stelling took everything from my family except our memory of Jennifer and our commitment to truth. He took her life. He took 21 years from us by staying silent. He took our chance to bury our daughter, to say goodbye properly. He won't take anything else. He'll die in prison, having returned nothing. And that's his choice. When asked if she forgives him, Diane replied, "Forgiveness requires repentance. Repentance requires truth. He hasn't told us where Jennifer is. So no, I don't forgive him, and anyone who suggests I should can ask themselves if they'd forgive the man who murdered their child and then watched them grieve for 18 years while pretending to care." The final image that defines Jennifer's case is a photo taken on August 16, 2018, the 15th anniversary vigil. The picture has appeared in every documentary, every news article, every lecture about violence and memory. In the photo, the Hartleys and their neighbors stand in front of 412 Birch Avenue, candles glowing in the darkness, faces tired and hollow. But in the corner of the frame, a detail that haunts everyone who sees it is a faint reflection in a window. Mark Stelling, holding the camera, his face shows what some experts describe as satisfaction, a quiet contentment, like someone revisiting something they built, like an artist admiring finished work. That reflection, him watching them from the window, captures everything about Jennifer's case in one haunting frame. The killer, present at the vigil just 23 steps away, unseen by the people he hurt, the family grieving, unaware they were being watched, and the fact that he needed to photograph it, to preserve that moment digitally, says everything. It reveals how proximity, what should have led to his discovery, was instead the tool of his cruelty. It shows how the surveillance didn't stop after the crime, but became part of it. The neighborhood didn't see it, because he looked familiar, because he acted helpful. The Hartleys mourned, while the man responsible cataloged their grief from his bedroom window. Detective Sarah Chun keeps that photograph on her desk. It's printed on photo paper, framed without glass, and placed where she sees it every day. When people ask why, she says it reminds her why the work matters, why cold cases still deserve time, why DNA evidence must be preserved, and why investigators need to return, even when decades have passed. But the truth, the one she only admits during sleepless nights, is this: the photo reminds her how evil can look ordinary, how someone can smile at you and hurt you at the same time, that the person handing out flyers might also be the person you're searching for, that we might be standing in candlelight, grieving out loud while being watched by someone who knows everything, and we know nothing. Jennifer Marie Hartley was 19 years old when she left her house on August 16, 2003. She had just finished her first year of nursing school at the University of Michigan, a 3.7 GPA, and plans to go into pediatric care. On weekends, she volunteered at Monroe Mercy Hospital, teaching kids with cancer how to fold origami cranes while they got chemo. Her dream was to work with Doctors Without Borders, bringing care to places that needed it most. She loved Hey Ya by Outkast. She read mystery novels. She did impressions of her professors that made her mom laugh until she cried. She walked 4 minutes from her house to drop off a letter, and never came home. Jennifer exists now as memory and evidence. As a warning, a law, a case that shaped how others are handled. But 21 years later, her remains have never been found. Rachel Kowalski hasn't been found. Melissa Chang hasn't been found. Mark Stelling, now serving 3 life sentences, still claims he can't remember where he buried them. Whether that's the truth or just another way to keep control, no one knows. The families are left with silence, the cruelest form of harm. No grave, no place to go, no way to say goodbye. That silence becomes the final wound, the absence that never ends, the thing that still hurts them, not through violence, but through what he refuses to say. If Jennifer's case teaches anything, if cases teach anything at all, it's that justice, when delayed, still comes. But it takes more than it should. It takes years. It takes peace. It takes sleep and birthdays and hope. And by the time it arrives, no one feels whole anymore. The deeper truth behind that lesson is harder to face, that some people are so skilled at pretending that they become invisible, that someone can help search for your child, stand beside you at a vigil, and all the while be the one you're searching for. Stelling lived 23 steps away for 6,574 days. He walked the neighborhood, organized block parties, shoveled sidewalks. All of it happened. He really did those things, but none of it cancels out the other truth, that he murdered at least 3 women. And that his kindness wasn't proof of innocence. It was part of the plan. He stayed helpful so no one would look closer, because we don't suspect the people who blend in. We trust familiar faces. We assume danger looks like something else, but it doesn't. In January 2025, Diane Hartley moved to Ann Arbor. The house on Birch Avenue was sold to a developer who plans to demolish it and build 2 smaller homes on the lot. The structure will be gone, but not the memory. Some things can't be erased by time or construction. She tells her son David that she dreams often of that day, August 16, 2003. In her dream, Jennifer turns around. She comes back home, says she forgot something, and just like that, the whole timeline changes. She lives. The last 21 years never happen. Diane wakes from these dreams crying, not because they're nightmares, but because they're the life she wanted and will never have, because Jennifer really did walk out that door. And nothing will ever undo that. The story ends, but doesn't end. Mark Stelling will die in prison. And when he does, there will be a short notice in the local paper. Families will get an alert from Victim Services. And they'll feel something, or maybe they won't. Then they'll keep going. Because that's what people do. They survive. Even when survival seems impossible. Even when the truth is worse than the uncertainty. Even when the person you were searching for was never missing, just hidden, living right next door. These stories keep emerging. Justice delayed but not denied. As DNA tools evolve, as cold case units get funding, as families keep asking the right questions. And if you want to follow how modern forensic science is giving voice to cases once thought unsolvable, consider subscribing. Because evidence doesn't disappear. It waits. And sometimes it waits for decades. But eventually, truth arrives, and the people who thought time would protect them are learning that time didn't shield them. It preserved what they left behind.